Everything was finally falling into place, and for the first time in my life, I felt certain about the future. Not hopeful, not guessing, not dreaming in vague outlines, but certain. The kind of certainty that settles in your chest and stays there, warm and steady, like a promise you've already kept. The ring sat heavy in my jacket pocket that morning, its small box pressing against my ribs every time I moved. I must have checked it a dozen times before leaving the house, slipping my hand inside the pocket just to feel the smooth velvet edge, just to reassure myself that it was still there. 2 years of my life had led to that ring. 2 years of late-night conversations, shared meals, shared fears, shared laughter. 2 years of building something I believed was unbreakable. Her name filled my thoughts as naturally as breathing. She had a way of making ordinary days feel important. Even when we argued, it never felt like a threat to us. It felt like proof that we were real, that we were learning each other. We talked about the future often, where we'd live, how many kids we'd want, what kind of life we'd build. She'd tease me about being too serious, and I'd tease her about never planning ahead, but it always ended the same way. Laughter, closeness, certainty. What made it even better was how easily she fit into my family. From the very beginning, she'd been welcomed like she belonged. My mother adored her. My cousins treated her like she'd always been there. And my father, my dad, he got along with her almost effortlessly. Everyone did. He was that kind of man. My dad had always been larger than life to me. Growing up, he was my example of what a man should be. Confident without being loud, successful without being arrogant, charming without trying. He could walk into a room full of strangers and leave with friends. People listened when he spoke. They trusted him. I trusted him. Sometimes I joked that he had more fans than a celebrity. Even my friends admired him. So when my girlfriend laughed a little too hard at his jokes or asked his opinion on things instead of mine, I never felt threatened. Why would I? He was my father. The idea that he could ever cross a line like that didn't exist in my world. That Saturday afternoon, I went to his house alone. My hands were sweating as I rang the bell, the nervous energy buzzing through me like electricity. Not because I was afraid, but because I was excited. This was one of those moments you imagine as a kid without knowing it. A moment where life feels official. He opened the door with a smile, the same easy smile he'd worn my entire life. "You look serious," he said, stepping aside to let me in. "I am," I replied, grinning despite myself. We sat in the living room, the familiar scent of his aftershave lingering in the air. Family photos lined the walls, vacations, birthdays, graduations. Proof of a life that had always seemed solid. He poured us drinks, even though it was still early, and raised his glass. "So," he said, studying my face, "what's going on?" I reached into my pocket and pulled out the small box. For a second, I just looked at it, letting the weight of the moment settle. Then I handed it to him. "I'm proposing to her next weekend," I said. "I already planned everything. The restaurant, the timing, what I'm going to say. I just wanted you to know first." He opened the box slowly. The ring caught the light, and for a brief second, something flickered across his face. It was so quick I almost missed it. I assumed it was emotion, pride. He smiled. "You're ready," he said. "I can see it." That smile stayed with me all day. Felt like approval, like a blessing. I talked for another hour, telling him about my plans, about how nervous I was, about how sure I felt. He listened, nodding, offering advice the way he always had. When I finally stood to leave, he clapped a hand on my shoulder. "You've chosen well," he said. Those words replayed in my head all the way home. The rest of the week felt like a countdown. Every day at work dragged on forever. My focus split between emails and the moment waiting for me at the end of the week. I imagined her reaction constantly. Her surprise, her laughter, maybe even tears. I imagined calling my parents afterward, hearing my mom cry with happiness, hearing my dad's proud voice on the other end of the phone. At home, things felt comfortable, familiar. She moved around the apartment like it was already hers. She cooked dinner while I sat on the counter, stealing bites and making her laugh. At night, we lay in bed talking about nothing and everything, our legs tangled together, the future feeling so close I could almost touch it. "You've been smiling a lot lately," she said one night, turning on her side to look at me. "Can't a guy just be happy?" I asked. She smiled back. "I guess he can." There was no warning sign I recognized then. No alarm bell. Just normal life unfolding the way it always had. On Thursday, we had dinner with my parents. It was casual, unplanned. My mom cooked too much food, as always. My dad told stories, as always. She sat beside me, her knee brushing mine under the table. At one point, she got up to help my mom in the kitchen, and I caught my dad watching her as she walked away. I didn't think anything of it. After dinner, my dad pulled me aside and asked how work was going. We talked about business, about stress, about responsibility. The same conversations we'd always had. Before we left, he hugged me and said, "I'm proud of you." That night, lying in bed, I reached into my pocket again, touching the ring box hidden deep inside my jacket hanging on the chair. My heart felt full, complete. I had no idea that every piece of certainty I held was already cracking beneath the surface. That the plan I believed was perfect was built on trust that was about to collapse. But in that moment, there was no doubt in me at all. I fell asleep believing I was walking toward the best day of my life. The shift was subtle at first, so subtle I doubted myself every time I noticed it. Life doesn't usually announce when it's about to break something important. It just changes the temperature slightly and waits to see if you feel the cold. On Monday morning, she kissed me goodbye like she always did, but her lips barely lingered. No smile afterward. No playful comment. I watched her grab her bag and walk out, telling myself I was imagining things. People had off days. I'd had plenty myself. At work, I tried to focus, but my thoughts kept drifting back to her. I sent a text around noon. "How's your day going?" Normally, she'd reply within minutes, sometimes with a joke, sometimes with a voice note just to hear my reaction. This time, the reply came an hour later. "Busy. Talk later." I stared at the screen longer than I should have. It wasn't what she said. It was how she said it. Short, closed, like a door gently but firmly shut. That evening, when we sat across from each other at dinner, the space between us felt wider than the table. She picked at her food, her phone lighting up beside her every few minutes. I noticed she angled the screen away from me. "Everything okay?" I asked casually, forcing my tone to stay light. She looked up quickly, almost startled. "Yeah, just tired." I nodded, accepting the answer because it was easier than pressing. I told myself not to overthink. Love meant trust, didn't it? And I trusted her. Completely. The next day wasn't much better. Her laughter, the sound that used to pull me toward her no matter where I was in the room, seemed to have vanished. When I tried to hug her from behind as she brushed her teeth, she gently stepped away. "Not now," she said. "I'm late." I watched her leave the bathroom, catching my own reflection in the mirror afterward. I looked uncertain. That was new. That afternoon, I tried calling my dad. It went straight to voicemail. That was unusual. He almost always picked up or called back within minutes. I left a message anyway, telling him I just wanted to talk. Half an hour passed. Then an hour. Nothing. By Wednesday, the strange feeling had settled into my chest like a weight. Conversations with her felt forced, like we were both reading from scripts that no longer matched the scene. At night, she'd turn away sooner than usual, her back to me, scrolling through her phone until the screen went dark. "Who are you texting so much?" I asked one night, trying to sound playful. "Friends," she replied too quickly. "Why?" "No reason," I said, immediately regretting the question. Silence followed. Thick, uncomfortable. On Thursday evening, I stayed late at work to distract myself. When I finally drove home, the sky was already dark. As I pulled into the driveway, I noticed her car parked there. Relief washed over me. Maybe tonight we'd talk. Maybe I'd imagined everything. I unlocked the door and stepped inside. The house was quiet. "Hey," I called out. No answer. Her bag wasn't on the chair where she usually dropped it. Her shoes weren't by the door. I checked the bedroom. Empty. Confusion crept in. Her car was here, so where was she? I stepped back outside, scanning the street. That's when I noticed the light on at my dad's house across the way. Curtains partially drawn. Movement inside. A strange feeling tightened my stomach. I told myself not to be ridiculous. She'd probably stop by to drop something off or say hello. She loved my parents. That was normal. Still, my feet carried me closer before my mind caught up. I stopped near the window, staying just out of sight. And then I saw them. They were sitting close together on the couch. Too close. A bottle of wine sat open on the table, 2 glasses beside it. She was laughing, really laughing, the sound I hadn't heard in days. My dad leaned toward her, saying something that made her touch his arm lightly as she laughed again. That touch hit me like a physical blow. My mind refused to process what my eyes were seeing. It didn't fit any version of reality I knew. I waited for something to correct itself, for distance to appear between them, for the scene to make sense. Didn't. They looked comfortable, familiar, like this wasn't new. I stepped back slowly, my heart pounding so hard it felt like it might burst through my chest. My hands were shaking. I didn't confront them. Couldn't. I didn't even know how to form the words. I walked back to my house on legs that felt numb, locked the door, and sat on the edge of the bed in the dark. Time lost its meaning. Every possible explanation ran through my head. Maybe I'd misunderstood. Maybe it was innocent. Maybe they were just talking. But the way she'd touched him, the way he'd leaned in, those weren't gestures you misread. When she finally came home, it was late. I heard the door open quietly, like she was trying not to wake me. I didn't move. I lay there, staring at the ceiling, my heart racing. She slipped into bed beside me, careful, distant. I could smell wine on her breath. "Did you have a good night?" I asked softly. She froze. There it was. That pause. That tiny moment where truth decides whether to reveal itself or hide. "Yeah," she said finally. "Just hung out." "With who?" Another pause. Longer this time. "Your dad," she said. My chest tightened. "Why?" She turned slightly but didn't face me. "We talked." "About what?" She didn't answer. The silence between us grew unbearable. I wanted her to laugh it off, to tell me I was being stupid, to reassure me. Instead, she lay there stiffly, like someone waiting for a storm to pass. I didn't sleep that night. Every memory replayed itself with new meaning. Every moment I'd brushed off as harmless now felt loaded. The jokes, the glances, the way she'd asked his opinion on things that concerned us. By morning, I was exhausted, emotionally and physically. She got up early, saying she had errands to run. She kissed my cheek, not my lips. As the door closed behind her, I sat alone in the quiet house, the ring still hidden in my jacket pocket. The perfect plan was still there, but the picture I'd trusted my entire life had started to crack, and no matter how hard I tried, I couldn't pretend I didn't see it anymore. I waited, not because I had a plan, and not because I knew what I was going to say, but because waiting felt like the only thing keeping me from completely falling apart. The house felt different that day. Too quiet. Every sound echoed. The ticking clock, the hum of the refrigerator, my own breathing. I sat on the couch for hours, staring at nothing, replaying the night before again and again, hoping that somehow the memory would change if I looked at it from enough angles. Didn't. By evening, my body felt hollow. I hadn't eaten. I hadn't slept. My phone lay face down on the table, untouched. I didn't want messages. I didn't want explanations delivered through a screen. I needed to hear her voice. I needed to see her face when I asked the question that had been burning inside my chest since the moment I'd looked through that window. When the door finally opened, I didn't jump. I didn't turn. I just stayed where I was, listening to her footsteps as she moved cautiously inside, like she could sense the tension waiting for her. "You're home early," she said softly. I stood up slowly and faced her. She stopped mid-step. Our eyes locked, and for a moment, neither of us spoke. I searched her face for something. Confusion, guilt, fear. But what I saw instead unsettled me more. She looked calm, prepared. Were you with my dad? I asked. The words came out steady, even though my hands were shaking. Her breath caught. She didn't answer right away. She just stared at me, like she was weighing something heavy in her mind. Then she looked down. That was all it took. No, I said quietly, my voice breaking for the first time. Don't do that. Don't look away. Just answer me. She lifted her head again, her eyes glossy but dry. Yes. One word. That was it. No explanation attached. No denial. No attempt to soften the blow. I felt something inside me crack open. How long? I asked. She hesitated. It doesn't matter. It matters to me, I snapped. Everything matters to me right now. She exhaled slowly, like she'd been holding her breath for days. A few weeks, while I was planning our future, while I was carrying a ring in my pocket, while I was telling my father I trusted him with the biggest moment of my life. A few weeks, I repeated, laughing once, sharp and empty. And you didn't think to tell me? I didn't know how, she said. It wasn't supposed to happen. Then why did it? My voice rose despite my effort to keep it under control. Why him? She finally looked guilty then, but not devastated. Not ashamed in the way I expected. Instead, her expression softened into something else. Relief. He understands me, she said quietly. In ways you don't. Those words hit harder than anything else she could have said. I understand you, I said. I've been with you every day. I listen to you. I build my life around you. She shook her head. You listen, but you don't hear. With him, I feel seen. I stared at her like she was a stranger. He's my father. I know, she whispered. The room felt too small, like the walls were closing in. I ran a hand through my hair, pacing, trying to breathe. So what is this? I asked. Are you saying you love him? She didn't answer immediately. That silence was louder than any confession. I don't know what it is, she said finally. But it's real. I stopped pacing. And what about us? She swallowed. I don't think we're the same anymore. Something inside me collapsed completely then. 2 years reduced to a sentence. Plans erased. Promises invalidated. Did he tell you to say that? I asked. Her eyes flashed. No, this isn't about him manipulating me. Then where is he? I demanded. Why isn't he here explaining himself? She looked away again. He didn't want to make things worse. I laughed bitterly. Too late. I grabbed my phone and called him. It rang. Once, twice. Then his voice came through, calm as ever. Son, he said. Did you sleep with my girlfriend? I asked. There was a pause. Longer than necessary. Yes, he said. No apology. No hesitation. I closed my eyes. Why? I didn't plan it, he replied. But feelings developed. Feelings, I repeated. For my partner. I never wanted to hurt you. You did, I said. You destroyed me. He sighed. We need to talk like men. No, I snapped. You don't get to talk like anything anymore. I hung up before he could respond. The room felt heavy with everything unsaid. She was crying now, silently, tears slipping down her cheeks. I watched her, detached, like I was observing someone else's tragedy. Do you want to be with him? I asked. She nodded slowly. That was the moment something shifted inside me. The pain didn't disappear, but it hardened, clarified. Then pack your things, I said. She looked up sharply. What? You heard me. You're serious? Yes. She hesitated, then walked toward the bedroom. I followed, leaning against the doorframe as she began pulling clothes from drawers, folding them mechanically. Each item felt like another piece of my life being boxed up and carried away. I never meant for this to hurt you like this, she said quietly. There's no way this doesn't hurt, I replied. When she finished, she stood in front of me, bag at her feet. I'm sorry, she said. I nodded once. Go. She left without another word. When the door closed, The silence that followed was absolute. I slid down against the wall, my legs giving out beneath me. My chest ached in a way I didn't know was possible. Betrayal from the woman I loved was devastating, but betrayal from my father cut deeper than I could comprehend. That night, I finally pulled the ring from my pocket. I stared at it for a long time, the diamond catching the light like it was mocking me. Then I closed the box and placed it on the table. Everything I believed in had shattered, and there was no putting it back together. The days that followed didn't unfold like time anymore. They collapsed into each other, shapeless and heavy, marked only by exhaustion and shock. Morning came whether I wanted it to or not. Night followed, bringing no rest. I moved through my own house like a stranger, touching familiar objects that no longer felt connected to me. The couch where we used to sit together. The mug she always used. The empty side of the bed. I didn't tell anyone at first. I didn't know how. There were no words strong enough, no sentence that didn't sound unreal when I tried to form it in my head. How do you say my girlfriend left me for my father without it sounding like a lie or a cruel joke? But secrets like that don't stay buried for long. My mother was the first to notice something was wrong. She called me on the third day. I almost didn't answer. "Are you okay?" she asked immediately. Not hello. Not how are you. Just that. I swallowed hard. "I don't know." There was a pause on the line. "Where is she?" That was when everything spilled out. Not cleanly. Not calmly. I told her in fragments, my voice breaking, my hands shaking so badly I had to sit down. There was silence on the other end when I finished. Long, stunned silence. Then she whispered, "Your father?" "Yes." She hung up without another word. An hour later, she was at my door. Her eyes were red, her face pale. She didn't ask me anything else. She just pulled me into a hug, tight and desperate, like she was holding on to something that was slipping away. "I'm so sorry," she kept saying. "I'm so sorry." That night, my father didn't come home. The next day, the family exploded. Calls came in from relatives who had heard pieces of the story and wanted confirmation. Some were angry. Some were confused. Some didn't know what to say at all. My mother packed a bag and went to stay with her sister, unable to be in the same space as the man she'd built her life with. The house I'd grown up in became a battlefield of silence and slammed doors. My father tried to reach me again. Texts, voicemails, messages filled with explanations I didn't want to hear. "I never meant for this to happen. She came to me. We're adults. Feelings aren't always controllable." Every message felt like another insult, like he was trying to justify something that had no justification. I stopped responding. Work became impossible. I showed up late. I left early. I stared at my computer screen without seeing anything. Eventually, I stopped going altogether. I told my boss I needed time. He didn't ask questions. Maybe he could see it on my face. I withdrew from everything. Friends, routines, the outside world. Days passed without sunlight touching my skin. I slept on the couch because the bedroom felt too empty. At night, my mind replayed every conversation I'd ever had with my father, searching for signs I'd missed. Every smile felt fake in retrospect. Every piece of advice felt tainted. Was it my fault for bringing her so close? For trusting him so completely? That question haunted me. One afternoon, I ran into a cousin at the grocery store. He froze when he saw me. "I heard," he said awkwardly. I nodded. "That's messed up," he added, shaking his head. I don't even know what to say. Neither did I. Weeks passed like that. Isolation became my default state. I stopped checking my phone. Stopped caring about anything beyond getting through the day. The future I'd imagined no longer existed, and without it, everything felt pointless. Then one afternoon, my phone buzzed. A message from my father. I almost ignored it. I wish I had. "We need to talk," it read. "She's pregnant." The room tilted. I read the message again, certain I'd misunderstood. My hands went numb. The phone slipped from my fingers and hit the floor with a dull thud. Pregnant. The word echoed in my head, over and over, until it lost all meaning and became something monstrous instead. My chest tightened, and for a moment, I thought I might pass out. I sat on the floor, my back against the wall, breathing shallowly. That was it. That was the final blow. They weren't just a betrayal anymore. They were a new reality. Permanent one. A child that would exist because of something that destroyed my life. I expected rage, screaming, violence. Instead, what I felt was emptiness. A vast, hollow space where anger should have been. Like whatever part of me was capable of reacting had already been used up. I didn't reply. I didn't cry. I just sat there until the sun went down, staring at the wall, realizing that the story I thought I was living had ended without my permission. And I was standing alone in the ruins, trying to figure out who I was supposed to be now. Time didn't heal me. It dulled me. The sharp edges of pain slowly wore down, not because things made sense, but because my body couldn't stay in survival mode forever. Weeks turned into months. The world kept moving, indifferent to my loss, and eventually I had no choice but to move with it. I went back to work, not because I was motivated, but because sitting alone with my thoughts had become unbearable. I forced myself into routines, morning showers, commutes, meetings, small talk. I learned how to answer, "How are you?" with a neutral smile and a lie that sounded convincing enough. "I'm okay." Most people accepted it. Some didn't push. A few tried, then gave up when they realized I wasn't ready to explain something so twisted it barely felt real to me. I moved out of the house we'd shared. I couldn't stay there anymore. Every corner carried her shadow. I packed only what I needed and left the rest behind, like a life I'd outgrown without warning. The ring went with me, sealed in its box, buried deep in a drawer I rarely opened. My mother called often. She sounded different now, older, tired in a way that had nothing to do with sleep. She never spoke about my father unless I asked, which I never did. I knew she'd filed for separation. I knew the marriage was over. Knowing didn't make it easier. As for him, he became a ghost. Still alive, still present somewhere in the world, but no longer part of mine. I didn't block his number. I didn't need to. Silence was louder than any message he could send. One evening, months after everything fell apart, I stopped at a coffee shop near my new place. It was the kind of place people went to feel human again. Soft music, low conversations, the smell of roasted beans and something sweet baking in the back. I was standing in line when I felt it. That instinctive pull, that awareness you get before your mind catches up. I turned. They were sitting near the window. For a moment, I couldn't move. My body reacted before my emotions did, freezing me in place like I'd walked into a memory instead of a room. She looked thinner. Her face was tired. Her eyes shadowed in a way I'd never seen before. My father sat across from her, his posture slumped, his hair more gray than I remembered. They weren't laughing. They weren't even talking. They sat in silence, cups untouched, like two people carrying something too heavy to set down. I considered leaving. My heart started to race, old instincts screaming at me to escape. But then she looked up. Our eyes met. Her hand flew to her mouth. And in that instant, everything I'd imagined her feeling over the past months appeared on her face at once. Shock, regret, fear, longing. Tears welled up before she could stop them. I stepped forward before I could talk myself out of it. She stood up slowly, like she wasn't sure I was real. My father followed her movement but stayed seated, his gaze fixed on the table. "I didn't know you lived around here," she said, her voice trembling. "I didn't," I replied. "I moved." Silence stretched between us. Awkward, heavy, loaded with everything we'd never said. "You look different," she said. "So do you." She nodded, wiping at her eyes. "Can we talk?" I glanced at my father. He still hadn't looked up. "No," I said calmly. Her face crumpled slightly, but she nodded again, like she understood she didn't deserve even that much. "I just want you to know," she said quietly. "I made the biggest mistake of my life." There it was, the sentence I'd imagined hearing 100 times in my darkest nights. The words I thought would bring relief, closure, satisfaction. They didn't. I felt nothing. No triumph. No validation. Just a strange, distant clarity. I believe you, I said. Her breath hitched. You do. Yes, I replied. But that doesn't change anything. Tears spilled freely now. I think about you every day. I nodded once. I don't. That wasn't entirely true. But it was true enough. She flinched, like the honesty hurt more than anger ever could. I thought I knew who I was, she whispered. I didn't. I looked at her then, really looked at her, and for the first time I didn't see the woman I loved. I saw someone lost, someone broken in ways I couldn't fix and no longer wanted to try to. That's something you have to figure out on your own, I said. My father finally looked up. His eyes met mine, and in them, I saw something I'd never seen before. Shame. He opened his mouth to speak. I raised a hand. Don't. He closed it again. I turned back to her. Take care of yourself. Then I walked away. My hands were steady. My chest was calm. Each step felt lighter than the last, like I was leaving something behind with every footfall. That night, I went home and opened the drawer. I took out the ring. I didn't stare at it this time. I didn't mourn what it represented. I saw it for what it was, a symbol of a future that was never meant to exist. The next day, I sold it. The money didn't feel like compensation, felt like release. I used it as seed capital, something I'd been too afraid to do before. I poured my energy into building something that was mine alone, something no one could take from me. The work consumed me, in a good way. I learned who I was when I wasn't defined by a relationship or a family role. I learned my limits, my strengths, my resilience. And one morning, months later, I woke up and realized something remarkable. I wasn't angry anymore. Not at her, not at him, not even at myself. The betrayal hadn't ended my life. It had stripped it down to its foundation and forced me to rebuild honestly, painfully, authentically. She didn't leave me for my father. She left because she didn't know who she was. And losing her was the moment I finally discovered who I was meant to be.